Good morning. We're talking about content area reading. Is actually your last video lecture and our last activity. So I had a great summer. I hope you did too. First of all, I noticed that a lot of you were going ahead and using citations, and so I just want to drop this on you. Okay, first of all, if you use it within the text, you put the name and date. However, never put the date by itself or the name by itself. Also, you only need to repeat this if it's necessary to remind the reader what source you're using. I noticed a lot of people were putting them at the end of every sentence. It's not necessary really to put your citation more than once per paragraph perhaps, and sometimes if you're using two paragraphs, you can cite that person at the end. Okay? If you use a quote, however, cite the person, the date, and the page number. Page number only if you quote. The rest of the time, the name and date always appear together. Okay? Those are just a couple of tips you might find useful. You're going to take a class, if you haven't already, that covers this in more detail. But for those of you who like to go out there and give things a shot, this is just a couple of tips for you to do that better. Be economical about your citations. Be sure the name and date are always together. Today we're talking about writing across the content areas. And your syllabus says Chapter 2, but it's actually Chapter 12. And that chapter is just full of classroom-ready techniques, and they describe the techniques within the philosophy, for example, integrated themes, etc. Just a few quick things that we can use to teach writing in the content areas. And again, my personal view and the view of a lot of educational writers is that all teachers, particularly elementary, middle school, all teachers should be teachers of writing and reading. And in every class that we teach, we should provide students opportunities not just to practice writing, but to use writing in meaningful ways. And here are some meaningful ways. Some of them are pretty obvious, but as we get further down, they might seem less obvious. In social studies, historical reporting, you use citations, and the more primary documents you can use, the better, because we want to go back in time to that place and report on that event in history. Biography. In social studies, there's all sorts of biography. Politicians, war heroes, inventors, authors, all sorts of biographies that can be written in social studies because it's kind of all-encompassing. Current events, which is what we're going to write today, not a specific current event, but broad and persistent problems. For example, poverty. If you write a report on poverty, an informative text about poverty, that's something that's been going on for a very, very long time. Some things are more specific. For example, the assignment you'll do today is to write a personal, persuasive piece about anti-intellectualism in America today. Okay, so that's kind of specific, but it's something that has occurred other times in history. Okay, in science, biography once again, but we focus on scientists, and in focusing on the biography of scientists, we learn not only what did they do, but what was the context in which they invented or discovered the thing that they did. Lab reports, this is formula writing, and it's important for children to learn formula writing. There are specific guidelines in all sorts of writing, particularly research writing, and I just talked about a couple of them here for you. But lab reports are pretty specific. In older social studies, you might do case briefs of important historical cases, court cases, and teach them to do a case brief. Again, formula writing, it has to be written in a very, very specific way. But what about poetry and science? I think by now they've told us all why leaves change color in the fall. The chlorophyll was always there, or the color was always there, they say, but the chlorophyll has gone away. I think that I've used that poem with you before. Okay, to put a scientific concept in an artistic way requires the child to think about it from outside the box. And an example too that I could give you is a pet care manual. I had a student who was kind of a daydreamer. He was looking out the window one day, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I was just thinking how weird it would be to have a giraffe as a pet." And I don't know what it was that put that in his mind, but it started us off on a foray to write pet care manuals based on the structure of normal pet care manuals about animals that we've never seen before or that people don't normally have as pets. For example, a mountain goat, a vicuña, look it up, a springbok, etc. And they researched these animals to see what they needed and explained in their pet care manuals how to create a home for them. A wonderful book that does something similar is called The Salamander Room. I can't remember the name of the author. The Salamander Room. Very interesting book about natural ecosystem and the animals that live in it and what it means when we violate the ecosystem, but they tell it in a wonderful story. In mathematics, yes, there's writing in mathematics. For example, biography once again. I remember them teaching us about Pythagoras, but I don't remember anybody telling me who he was, and it would be useful to me as a learner to find out who Pythagoras was, why did he create this theorem, and what was the context in which that happened, and why is it meaningful to us still today? That would be a useful thing for me as a student to research. Explaining the process, writing to explain the process, not just showing your work, but actually explain to me what you did. Or if you were explaining this to someone who didn't know how to do it, how would you explain that to them? Think about audience awareness. We always consider audience awareness. Problem solving. How did you get from A to B? And come up with that answer. Rather than like in the olden days when they said there's one specific way to do it, if you get the right answer but do it wrong, it's still wrong. That to me never made sense. But if I could explain to you how I solved it and why I got to that answer, that would be more meaningful than just, nope, I want you to be a square peg that fits in this square hole. Okay? Explain the algorithm step by step. Again, how would you explain this process to someone who doesn't know how to do it? Your chapter spends a little bit of time talking about integrating themes. And what it basically means is we can do reading, writing, mathematics, science, everything within the context of a theme. For example, if I choose the theme of a farm, we talk about the buildings, we talk about the animals, that's science. We talk about the plants, also science, plant and animal kingdoms. Okay, we talk about the machinery, mechanics. There's all sorts of mathematics that happens on a farm. There's lots of ways you can do it. If you do farms in kindergarten, it's going to be a very introductory kind of thing. But if you do farms in 7th grade, science, or social studies, there's no way you can teach it without bringing in the history, the social studies, the economics, the science of plant husbandry, I think they call it, etc. This is my book, Themes Across the Curriculum. It's not in print anymore, but I think you can download free PDF somewhere. It's in the public domain now, but it's published by Prentice Hall. And this is a theory that I proposed, like this book, I actually wrote it about 25 years ago. And it's still there in your very up-to-date book. The idea is that we are using spelling words that we need in our reading and writing, not some isolated spelling words. We're writing, not just in language arts, in isolated language arts class, but in science and in math. We're writing. We're thinking creatively. We're problem solving, not just in math, but also in science, and also in social studies. We're problem solving in all of those things. What's the problem? And how can we teach these problems in a holistic context? And that's what teaching across the curriculum is about. So we have these two things about integration, teaching across the curriculum and writing in the content areas. And all of these things are related and all of them are connected. Your assignment and your last assignment, and it must be in by noon Friday so I can get my grades in. Your assignment is to write a personal piece with support, although you don't have to, it's a commentary, so bring in the support, but you don't have to cite everything you say because it is a commentary, on anti-intellectualism in America today. I'm not thinking about a 15-page paper. It's not like a capstone experience. It's just like the other assignments we've done, perhaps a page and a half, 2 pages, giving, what you think and supported by sources about anti-intellectualism in America today. Cool? Read chapter 12. It's not something I would quiz you over because, like I said, mostly it's useful activities, but do absorb those activities. A lot of good stuff to use.